You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. This right here for the number one. Number one shit with your number one. You ain't number one, just another one. Everybody saying that they number one. Ring the alarm. The caterpillar keeps firing. Oh, we in the war. Where butterflies keep dying. Ah.
Welcome back to the Coliseum of Fantasy Knowledge. This is the IDP Fantasy Empire coming at you. We're actually doing a simulcast right now. We got a live feed going on YouTube, and then we're, of course, recording to put it on our website. So it's kind of exciting.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. This is our first live stream on YouTube. I know we've talked and sent some of our podcasts to YouTube, but this will be the first live stream.
All right, so this week...
Where can people find us?
Oh, yeah, you can always find us at idpfantasyempire.com. You can hit us up on Twitter at IDPEmpire. Again, this is the time of year where you're getting ready for your draft season, so always make sure to be ready. Our draft kit is available. We have the new updated version out, so be sure to check that out. I want to give them a little details on the draft kit.
Yeah, it's 20 tabs. It covers everything that you need to know for your defensive linemen. I'm going to take out my mic. It covers everything that you need to know from defensive linemen, trends from last season, what we expect this season, the ranks, linebackers, defensive backs. It's going to cover all that. We've also got updated tiers, updated consolidated tiers, which are going to have both Paul and my tiers combined. A lot of people really love that. A lot of people love our depth charts too, because we update those about once a month. We got a lot of camp battles that we're going to talk about and what's going to go into that throughout the podcast.
Yeah, and training camp is started. I mean, you have the Bears and Ravens who reported first. They're already getting into their veterans. They're starting to come in, get a little work. Everyone's talking about Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco's situation and how Lamar's taking a lot of first-team reps. So that's kind of a new thing that they're working with, and they're trying to keep all their Robert Griffin III plays in under very hush-hush keys, according to a lot of the scouts that are out there. So this week we are going to talk about the NFC East, and we're also going to cover the NFC North. Last week we were going to do the North, but it just ran out of time. So this week we got it pretty narrowed down, so we're ready to go, and I think we're going to start with the Washington Redskins this week. So, Buck, you have the tackle leaders for us?
I do. We like jumping into these because we can kind of take away what they got last year and talk about the pieces that were missing. So starting out, we got Zach Brown with 127 total tackles. Next up is DJ Swearinger, a safety, with 79. It's interesting to note because of the huge gap in between the 127 and 79. Mason Foster was hurt most of the season, which he's going to eat into a lot of those tackles that Zach Brown got. Zach Brown's a beast, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect his numbers to drop a little bit. We got Martell Spate with 75. His numbers were a little bit higher, again, because of Mason Foster. Josh Norman was 64. Deshaun Everett was 62. Zach Vigil with 59. Kendall Fuller, who's gone with the Chiefs, at 55. Rashad Breeland with 50. Ryan Kerrigan with 46. Stacey McGee with 44. Preston Smith with 42. Quentin Dunbar with 35. Mason Foster 31. Matt Ioannidis with 27. He's a sneaky asset in this Redskins defense. And you got Ziggy Hood with 25. The sack leader was Ryan Kerrigan. No surprise here with 13 total. The next highest was 8, and that was Preston Smith. It's a lot of what we saw from him in college. You know, he's finally coming into his own.
Going into, I think we'll just start at the D-line. You have Jonathan Allen slated on the left side, looks like, and then you have Deron Payne, who they drafted in the first round this year. So got a couple of Alabama boys right there in the middle of your line. And then right now they have Stacey McGee slated as a starter. I don't know if he'll be starter week 1. It's going to be one of those wait-and-see situations. I think they have some guys they may try to work in. So that's one spot that I would see is a positional battle that could go into camp.
Who is one of those guys that you think will play in?
Well, the thing is, with running the nose tackle, honestly, I I like Tim Settle, but he's not built really for a DN spot.
Yeah.
But most of their sacks come from their linebacking core.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Ryan Kerrigan kind of proves that point. But I kind of like Anthony Lehner a little bit. He's been playing well enough, but not anything that we would necessarily see. It's just more of what the coaches see and what I've heard from them. So that's kind of what I look at. But I don't know a lot about Stacey McGee, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I don't either. He's coming from Oakland. That being said, I do like Matt Ioannidis. I liked how he played last year. He was very productive. Again, he was top 5 in their tackle leader. So I'm going to be looking to plug and play him, waiver wire pickup. But he's not going to be my number 1 defensive end / defensive tackle. Depending on how they slate these guys, MFL may have them as defensive tackles.
Yeah, they could.
Because they like to run that attacking 3-4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see that a lot with the Houston Texans. We see that a lot with the Baltimore Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
Deron Payne kind of speaks for himself. If you watched any Alabama tape, the dude's a freaking monster.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Jonathan Allen, I think they could be a wrecking crew.
And that's the thing. We didn't see anything from Jonathan Allen. So it's kind of like a guy that you kind of forgot about as a first-round pick. And so that's going to be a guy coming in. These guys are going to be fresh together, hopefully fresh and healthy. And then these 2 guys could honestly, because I forgot about Jonathan Allen after he got hurt and didn't play.
Right.
So it's one of those, again, if you're looking out in your leagues and for whatever reason someone was willing to ship him because they look back on the last year's stats and see zeros everywhere, then you may be able to get someone who honestly I think is a real good ball player.
I think you can get him as a discount, but do you like him as a defensive end as much as you like him as a defensive tackle?
I'd much rather have the D tackle numbers.
Right.
For sure.
Right. All right. Let's move into the linebacking spot. Again, we're going to have a premium podcast, and it's going to talk X's and O's. Our previous premium podcasts have talked about individual rookies coming out in their rookie season. We talked about every single rookie in every single position. That being said, we've got the strong outside linebacker, Preston Smith. What's unique about him, that we're probably going to touch in our premium podcast, is how these strong side linebackers have to be built to take on the run and hit up these tight ends. Preston Smith can body a tight end coming out to block him. Behind him, we've got Ryan Anderson, a guy that I expected to come in and start. What I'd like to see the Redskins do, I don't know if they necessarily will, is run Ryan Anderson the first 2 downs, bring Preston Smith in the 3rd down to pass rush.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to get that creative this year, especially with them spending a 2nd-round draft pick on Anderson last year. We got Mason Foster as the middle linebacker, inside middle linebacker. Martell Spate right behind him. We saw how productive he was with the time that he was given. Preston Brown is often injured, so Spate is going to be one of those guys that we're going to be expecting to pick up waiver wires.
Yeah.
Behind them, I don't really see anybody. Moving on to Zach Brown. Zach Brown is another one of those guys. Before he played last season, he was often injured. Also going to be one of those guys, if you're big into Madden, you're going to be able to get this guy day 1. Guy that I'm probably leaning towards over, heaven forbid, Brian Urlacher, just because of the way it's mixing up with the cards that you get on day 1. Behind him, you've got Zach Vigil. We saw both the Vigil brothers go off last season, Nick and Zach. I think it's one of those cases where it's gonna need to be an injury that's gonna force him into the starting lineup. I think he would play over Martell Spate, honestly.
Yeah, I believe so too.
You've got Ryan Kerrigan, again, that weak side linebacker that just crushes the right side of the field. Dude's an absolute freak. I've kind of discounted him. He's more of a good football player than an IDP player.
Yeah.
Pernell McPhee behind him. And we've also got Deshaun Mustard Hamilton.
Custom middle name.
Paul had tokened him that name in our pre-draft process just because, for some reason, Sean Dion Hamilton.
Just reminds me of Dijon Mustard, man. He's got the spicy sauce, man. And they must love Alabama guys.
Yeah.
They just love him, man. They've drafted him, I feel like every year for sure. I mean, that's 2 this year and 1 last year. They like them Alabama boys.
I'll take D-backs.
Yeah. You got on the left side for the D-backs, you got Orlando Scandrick. Behind him, you got Fabian Moreau, which Fabian actually got a lot of playing time last year. I remember that for sure. He's a guy who came up from Chicago, was really kind of underutilized in the system that John Fox had. And so he came over to Washington and had a little bit more of an impact than he ever did in Chicago. Then you have on the right side, you still have Josh Norman, the guy who's a shutdown guy, much like a Richard Sherman. He's not going to get you a ton of points. You may get an upside of an interception every once in a while, or the possible fumble recovery if that happens on the outside, but it's very rare. Then behind him, you got Quentin Dunbar, who also plays really good in spells. And then behind him, you got Adonis Alexander. This is a guy that they went and got in the supplemental draft in the 6th round, a guy who I actually liked coming out of college. I thought that he'll be special teams, so I don't think it's anything that you need to rush out to. It's just a guy that I want to personally just kind of keep a tab on. This kid is from Virginia Tech, and he was one of the 2 bigger name cornerbacks, which we're going to get to the other one later when we cover the Giants, that were in the supplemental draft. And a lot of people I talked to didn't even know they had a supplemental draft anymore. And I was like, yeah, that's still a thing. You just usually don't get huge names in them anymore. This year, they kind of had some guys who were really good in college that end up falling down to that because of injuries. And then you got on your strong side, or your strong safety, you have Dejon Everett, or DeJazier. I always mess up his name every time I say it. And then you have Monte Nicholson behind him. I basically started rostering last year just Redskins safeties because they just kept going out with injuries all year. And so I know a lot of these guys just by having them on my team. DJ Swearinger was a guy who wasn't originally a starter, picked him up because I believe Hall got hurt. And, now Hall's retired, so he moves into that starting role for free safety. Then you got Troy Apeke. I love this kid. I thought he had one of the better of the collegiate bowl games that we covered. I mean, he did win the MVP for that for his interception and pretty good return, almost a touchdown. And the kid ran like a 4.34 at the combine. And if you watched any of the combine, Dion was just enamored with this kid afterwards. He just couldn't say enough about him. I think he's got a real shot. Again, if someone gets banged up, which we've seen last year, they get banged up a lot, where he could actually come in and score you some points. Because I think he's going to be an Eric Weddle type of player in the future. I just see a lot of good things with him.
Do you think he'll start year 1?
Again, if injuries happen, then he may start. I don't know if he's going to be able to push Swearinger out of that spot unless something just really pops. But I think he also adds a special team value, too, if he can get started there and just work his way up.
Yeah, I agree with that. Josh Norman turning 30. Any thoughts about him losing a step? Obviously, the Redskins moved on from Kendall Fuller, sent him out to the Chiefs.
Until I really see it on the field and I can see him just getting dominated, kind of like a changing of guard we kind of saw with Richard Sherman. Yep. He's still a great ball player, but same thing we saw with Darrelle Revis. Like eventually you see them start giving up more than it's used to, or they start playing different because they can't keep up as much, or they can't be as physical. With Josh Norman, he's always been an in-your-face type of guy.
Right.
He's a guy who's going to get on you, stick on you early. I know he always shows up twice a year to play Odell. So, I know he's going to give us 110% on those games every time.
Right. And I don't think he's lost a step. I just asked that question just because of age, and he's coming into the twilight years of his career. He shut down Crabtree and Cooper last season. They completely took over that game.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, we got Orlando Scandrick on the other side. Has not been really productive at all for the Dallas Cowboys. He's a better fantasy asset than an actual NFL cornerback. I would like to see them bring in Fabian Monroe. I love the kid out of UCLA. I think he's a stud. I think he needs to clean up his game and coverage. He plays a little bit loose instead of tight coverage, where I'd like to see him closing that bookend with Josh Norman, but we haven't really seen him develop into that elite tier cornerback yet. I don't think they really have the team to use a nickel just because of the heavy pass rush that they like to use week in, week out.
Yeah, and I also forgot to mention some of these rookies that they got this last year were guys that we covered in our rookie cornerbacks. We covered all these guys going through scouting, taping, combine, all the extra bowl games. We have those in our premium podcast on our website. But the guys that are on there, they have Greg Stroman from Virginia Tech, who is actually a pretty good cover corner. He struggled a little bit in man, but that wasn't really the system they ran at Virginia Tech, and no one was watching them. They were watching the Edmond brothers. That's kind of how it goes. And again, I talked about Adonis Alexander, so they drafted those two guys from the same exact senior class, and then they got Quinn Balding from Virginia. This is another guy or Quinn Blanding, and he's a kid who I actually really liked. He was one of those sneaky late picks. Again, he went undrafted, but I thought that he would have been at least a 5th to 6th round pick. I thought he had the talent to be there. So those are just guys to watch in the future. Again, I'm not saying go out and grab these guys right now. Even in Dynasty, I feel like these guys are probably going to be available in most of your leagues. Really depending on the depth. If you're rocking a 20-man team or 20 teams, and you may have some struggles, but I think these guys are just ones you want to bookmark for now. Because again, with the age that Buck talks about, you never know when someone's going to start getting played in.
Right. Ready to go to Philly?
Let's go. Let's go to the champs, defending champions right here.
We don't have any cliche mask or
I should have brought my dog mask. Man, I forgot.
All right. To lead the team, we've got Nigel Bradham with 88 total tackles. Honestly, most of these tackles are pretty uniform in distribution. All of them are relatively close. Michael Kendricks, who left the team, was 77 total. Malcolm Jenkins was 76. Jalen Mills, 64. Rodney McLeod, 54. Patrick Robinson, 47. Brandon Graham, 47. Vinny Curry, who's also gone, 42. Corey Graham, 38. Ronald Darby, 34. Tim Jernigan, 29. Chris Long, 28. Is he still there?
I'm still confused on this situation. I don't think so because I'm not seeing him on the depth chart right now.
Okay. Jordan Hicks, who was injured most of the season, 28 total tackles. Fletcher Cox, 26. This is actually low for him. He usually averages about 40. Razul Douglas, 25. Najee Good, 22. Kamu Gruber-Hill with 22. Derek Barnett with 21. Bo Allen, 20. And Donnell Ellerby with 8. I like seeing Donnell Ellerby back with I guess he never was with Schwartz. Moving on.
And Chris Long is still with the Eagles. I did find it on there.
All right. Fletcher Cox led the team in sacks with 5.5. Number 2 was Derek Barnett, tied with Chris Long. Oh, I stand corrected. Brandon Graham had 9.5. So Brandon Graham did lead the team. This is one of his most productive years that I've seen from him.
Yeah.
Always been one of those guys, especially with Connor Barwin. I never really saw them give one player enough playing time.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw in the Super Bowl how they would like to rotate Brandon Graham down to the edge, and then they'd move Derek Barnett inside, or they'd swap them. Both of them have the body types pretty much similar. Derek Barnett's a little bit longer and rangier, honestly. But Brandon Graham's got more strength. So when I'm thinking about high-scoring IDP leagues, I'm kind of fading this team, except Derek Barnett, where Derek Barnett is a defensive end. Him being listed as a defensive end and then moving him around a lot actually plays to his ability, plays to his fantasy potential as well. Interceptions-wise, I know we didn't mention the last guys, the Redskins, but the team leader was Patrick Robinson, a kid coming from San Francisco. I really liked him. I don't believe he's even there anymore. I saw him on the Panthers.
I think he went to the Panthers, yeah.
That's right. So there were a lot of guys that were tied for 3. Jalen Mills, Rodney McLeod, some of the like. Go ahead and take us in the D-line.
All right. Now, this is one of the thickest D-lines I'd probably say that we've covered so far, just for the massive amount of depth they had. Right now on the right defensive end, you have Derek Barnett, first-round pick from last year, guy who got, kind of the game-winning fumble in the Super Bowl. Then you have Destiny Baheo in the middle, or that defensive tackle spot on the right side. And then, of course, you got Fletcher Cox, a former first-round pick as well. Then you got Brandon Graham, a former first-round pick as well, playing that left defensive end spot. Again, these guys right here, they're going to share the wealth. Again, I would agree with Buck with Derek Barnett. I feel like he's a really good value because he can also, again, be moved around. And the kid can get turnovers. This is one of the guys I was really excited about last year. One guy that I wanted to get on my team, but I got sniped just a little bit before I could have taken him. I just think he's a great athlete. And it seems like Tennessee every once in a while just produces a good athlete that just kind of goes under the radar. And maybe it's just because Alabama dominates the SEC so much, you just don't see him. I know I have trouble catching a Tennessee game every once in a while unless they flip off Alabama like Golden. That's really about the only way you can see those guys. Behind all these guys, though, behind Derek Barnett, you have Michael Bennett coming over from Seattle. Again, I have never been huge on Michael Bennett. I think he's a high-low guy at best. He doesn't really give you consistent numbers where you could go find I'd rather get a number 2, number 3 defensive end that could probably score a little bit more points than Michael Bennett does. Behind him, though, you have Josh Sweat. And we really liked Josh Sweat when we did our pre-draft ranks. This is a kid who really stuck out on tape. Again, they took him in the 4th round, so you're getting that value there where you can probably draft him a little bit later. And I think he's moving towards the future of maybe becoming a backup. But again, this is super thick. I mean, you got 4 deep on each position here at the Eagles. Again, I think some of these guys will fall off as they get roster cuts, but the Eagles love having that thick defensive line. You have Tim Jernigan behind Destiny, and he originally was at Baltimore. I believe he was there when they won their last Super Bowl, if I'm still correct there. And then you got Haloi Nada. I kind of forgot about Haloi Nada after he left Detroit, and now he's over there. So, again, just more thick bodies that can go in and stuff the run. I don't know how teams are going to really run against them. I just see all these names and how good these guys can be, and it's still daunting for them to be defending champs. You got Elijah Qualls behind Fletcher Cox. Again, he plays in relief, so not really a fantasy value there. And then you have Chris Long, guy who still is producing. I think he still wants to chase one more ring because I feel like he has that advantage with the Eagles with Carson Wentz coming back. You don't know what you're going to get. Box of chocolate situation there. But, I mean, overall, again, it's really hard to just pick out someone. Again, if it's dynasty, I would go after Derek Barnett if I needed it in the defensive end spot because I think that guy's the future in that defensive line.
I would agree with all that. Michael Bennett, again, is he facing legal charges?
I know about as much as Roger Goodell does. Honestly, I have no clue. So I think there's going to be nothing processed from this so far, but again, it could change in a matter of days.
Yeah.
All right, so moving into the linebacker spot, and this is usually, you would think with such a good defense, they would have a thicker number of linebackers, but that's never really been the case there. They have on the strong side, you got Nigel Bradham. In the middle linebacker spot, you have Jordan Hicks. And on the weak side, they have Nathan Gary. Behind Gary, there's Corey Nelson from formerly of Denver. You have Joe Walker backing up Jordan Hicks. And then Camus Grugerhill. I think I got it right. Yeah, all right. And he's also a former New England player. Again, they lost Mikael Kendricks. He went over to the Browns. Again, it's hard for me to love the Eagles linebackers. I've always liked Nigel Bradham, but I think I like him more as a football player than a fantasy player. And with Jordan Hicks, it's one of those, where do you cap the value and where do you value his injury history? That's really where you want to – that's where I see Jordan Hicks at. I like the guy as a player, but he's burned me so many times by being injured almost every season that, I mean, it's kind of hard to value him high for me.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go ahead and try and trade for him. Again, I always talk about pairing your high risk, high reward with consistent players. He's one of those guys that I'm willing to take, say, in the 7th round. I believe he's falling each year just because of his checkered injury history. And I think you can get him at a discount. There are some people that will swing on him just because they'd rather have him than consistency. I would rather have Jordan Hicks than KJ Wright. Now, that's a big gamble because we know what we're getting out of KJ Wright. We don't know necessarily what we're going to get out of Jordan Hicks without injury. You know what I mean? If he were to play a whole season, I could see him finishing top 15, posting similar numbers to a Zach Brown. Our Dynasty Startup League, his rookie season. Oh, no, that was last season.
Yeah, last season.
Rodney McLeod, Jeremy Reeves behind them at safety. You got Malcolm Jenkins. He's still alive. Trey Sullivan behind him. You got Ronald Darby as the other cornerback and Rasul Douglas. And Sidney Jones is projected to be what looks like a nickelback role right now. If he does play nickel, I'm going to be discounting him a little bit more. Obviously, I've got him a little bit higher than most, but I expect him to be picked on. And that dude can completely change a game.
Yeah, and he was one of the 3 that came out of that nasty Washington backfield when they all got drafted. So you had Kevin King, you had Sidney Jones, which really Sidney Jones was one that was most talked about. But, of course, as most of us know, he tore his ACL just during workouts, off-season workouts before the draft. And he still went in the 2nd round, and he deservingly so went to the 2nd round. This is a guy who, again, I love Sidney Jones as well. I kind of wanted to get him too and just take the risk that he's going to eventually play. But I also really like Avonte Maddox, a guy we didn't really talk about. This is a dude coming out of Pittsburgh. He got abused a lot by some of the bigger wide receivers that we covered in our draft prep. But I think Avonte Maddox can play a special teams role, and I think the guy can put in some solid numbers. I think he's not a horrible cornerback. I've seen a lot worse rookie cornerbacks than him. So I think that there's a chance there for him to maybe get some snaps, but again, it's going to be limited enough where you're not going to pick it up.
Right.
But for the rest of the backfield, I mean, I kind of know what I'm going to get. I've had Jalen Mills. He's been a high-low guy for years where I'll get 15 points a game, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to start him next week. He's on a roll, and then he'll give me 2.
Right.
And that's my issue with cornerbacks every year. I just don't know who to trust anymore. I have trust issues with my cornerbacks. But other than that, I'm looking forward to Sidney Jones for sure. That's the one guy I'm really watching through training camp, see how he looks.
Malcolm Jenkins or Rodney McLeod?
I'd still go with Malcolm Jenkins.
I'd take the other.
Yeah.
Honestly, you're going to get him about the same price, and I'd rather have McLeod. It's just preference for me, but honestly, same price, same reward.
Yeah.
Where are we going next?
I think we are going to New York, I believe. Yeah, we're going to go to the Giants.
Oh, that being said, I believe we had Jalen Mills in our top 5 cornerbacks.
I believe so, yeah.
We saw him get picked on a lot last season.
And he turned those into interceptions and turnovers. That was the one big thing with his fantasy points last year.
Yeah. New York Giants.
So, yeah, going into New York, this is a team that typically when you have a scoring system, which is covered in our draft kit, the Giants seem to lean more favorably for their linebackers getting solos at home games. And so it's one thing that we really like to cover in our draft kits, and we cover all the teams because it's an extra advantage, just an extra step you get in your process.
Right. And the draft kit alone, we've got the auction tracker calculator.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is a beast all of its own.
Yep.
You know, if you put in how many players you have and you put the percentages of what you want, you can go ahead and get an automatic feedback of, okay, this is how much money you have. This is how much percentage you projected to start out with, and this is what's left.
Yep.
Not only that, as Paul was alluding to, we have the ranks based on home stat crew. And what that means is, say the Giants, they have the same stat crew each and every week at home. So whenever they go on the road, they're the stat crew of the other team. Save the Cincinnati Bengals, who are the worst in assists.
Mm-hmm.
So you have what's called tackle opportunities. And out of those tackles, you may have a lot less assisted tackles than what could have been given out. And that's the problem with Cincinnati. For the Giants, you get the complete opposite. You get more assisted tackles than what should be given out. So it really depends on where they're playing. And in our draft kit, we cover that. We have that available. It's for $10. You can find it at idpfantasyempire.com, and it's in the store tab. Everybody who has bought our draft kit has already got the updated versions. We've got some feedback from 3 of those guys. They absolutely loved the additions that we made. We also did team defenses and special teams rankings. So for the Giants, we've got Landon Collins with 104 total tackles. I think he's going to lose a little bit of these because of the poor linebacking play. You got Damon Harrison with 76, who is a defensive tackle. Darian Thompson with 75. Jason Pierre-Paul, who is gone, with 68. Calvin Munson with 60. BJ Goodson with 53. He's often injured. Ross Cockrell with 50. Dalvin Tomlinson with 50. Kelvin Shepard with 49. Don't believe he's there anymore as well. Actually, maybe in a reserve role.
I'm not for sure. I'll look at
Eli Apple with 49. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie with 48. Devin Keenard with 41. Olivier Vernon with 38. Jonathan Casillas with 35. Andrew Adams, 34. Keenan Robinson with 32. Janoris Jenkins with 31. Jay Bromley with 21. And looking through, Ray Armstrong got a little bit of snaps here with 10 total tackles. We always love Ray. He's in his own little tier because he likes to jump on piles. Sack leader was Olivier Vernon. No surprise, 7. He was out a couple games to start the season. We were kind of wondering if he was going to even play. The next highest, oh man, I did it again. Jace Pierre-Paul actually led the team with 8.
Yeah, he's gone now, so it's okay.
All right. Number 3 was Devin Keenard with 4. The interception leader, I'm just double checking. Janoris Jenkins, Jackrabbit with 3, and he tied Ross Cockrell with 3.
All right, I guess we'll just lead it in. You want to do defensive line again?
Yeah, we'll go.
All right.
We got Kareem Martin, Kerry Wynn. I expect Wynn. Oh, they got BJ Hill. BJ Hill, I kind of expect him to play into a starting role just because we saw him at NC State. The only limitations for him is his bull rush, and that's his only move. I'd like to see him get a little bit more creative. It would have been nice for him to work with JPP. Having a couple extra digits on his hand may have helped out. But Olivier Vernon, I think, could step up and actually give him a lot of technique advice. Damon Harrison, guy's a beast. They call him Snacks.
Snacks. I love Snacks.
He's going to be the nose tackle. I don't really expect anybody else to push him for starting snaps. I think he's going to get spelled quite a bit just because he's a bigger body guy.
And I think RJ McIntosh is the guy who's going to fill in there when he gets spelled. RJ McIntosh is a big body dude from Miami. It's also really, really big into the music industry. Just throwing that out there. That guy's probably going to make some sick mixes for those guys on that defensive line, get them hyped.
Right.
But I think that guy can fill in whenever Harrison needs to be spelled.
If I'm not mistaken, the only thing bad that we had against RJ McIntosh was that he took plays off.
Yeah. He would get gas sometimes, but that's because I also had a lot of depth, so I don't think they worried about it as much.
Right.
But again, some guys, they show up for the NFL and they start working hard. So we'll see how that goes in camp.
You've also got Dalvin Tomlinson. I believe he's out of Ole Miss.
I believe so.
Okay. Look at that recollection.
Alabama.
Opposite.
But I thought it was from Ole Miss too.
Maybe it's a coach. All right. So I really liked Dalvin Tomlinson. I believe he's in his 3rd year.
Second year.
Yep. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl, and he was being very productive there. That's honestly the best thing to take away from those Senior Bowl practices is the O-line, D-line skirmishes.
Those are fun to watch, man, because you have, again, the best offensive line projected going against the best defensive lineman projected. Right. Again, some of the bigger stars stay out, like Bradley Chubb and stuff went in there. But honestly, I think it's good that those guys aren't in there because then you see these other guys that you really haven't heard of. Right. I mean, again, we watch a lot of tape, so we've kind of watched it, and this is more of a kind of a crown on the end of their tape to see what they do at the Senior Bowl practices. Yeah. And so, getting to see these guys, I didn't really like Harrison Phillips that much until I watched Senior Bowl practices and I saw what kind of work ethic he put in. And I jumped him up my board because I liked him that much more.
Right. And next year we plan on going to that.
I hope so. I really want to.
I would rather go to that than the scouting combine.
Yeah. I don't want to get yelled at.
Right.
Hey, what are you guys doing? Keep it down. We're working down here. Oh, sorry. Because I'd probably yell back. I'm not going to lie. Right. But with my defensive line take, the one interesting one that we covered a little bit is BJ Hill. The reason I call this interesting is he's listed in the defensive end spot, but he's listed as a D tackle. So we talk about that, that number value because, you can plug in someone who's working on the end who's going to typically get you more points than defensive tackle. I literally just went and picked him up in our MFL. Because I was like, I didn't know he was starting over. He was
really?
I literally just picked him up while you were talking about stat leaders. Because I was like, wait, BJ Hill's a D tackle at NC State. That's kind of interesting. I'm always looking for depth at defensive line. So you did it last week, so don't act like you didn't do it last week. But no, that's BJ Hill's a guy I'm definitely going to be watching now. Especially again, you have JPP who was a staple on that side for so long. He's gone, so I feel like it could be up to anyone. Honestly, I think BJ Hill, if he has a good push, and again, he works on the stuff that Buck talked about, you could look at him as a starter. All right, let's go secondary. Let's switch up our cadence here. On that left side cornerback, you have Eli Apple, former first-round pick 2 years ago. Behind him, you have Teddy Williams coming over from Carolina. At that strong safety, of course, you have Landon Collins, who's usually a top 3 finisher. especially without injury, he's probably going to finish top 3, if not number 1 this year. You have Michael Thomas behind him. You have Darian Thompson in the free safety spot. Behind him is Andrew Adams. And then on the right cornerback spot, you have Janoris Jenkins, a guy who I'm going to kind of miss him getting to fight Dez. He was a guy who shut him down, which honestly, Dez's hands shut him down, to be fair. And then you have William Gay behind him coming over. Again, he used to be almost a staple in Pittsburgh. I mean, he was a solid cornerback for quite a while. And then you have in the nickelback spot, you have Curtis Riley. But really, I think the nickelback spot is where you can maybe have some more play in the training camps. Because I like Sam Beal. Again, this is the other guy that I alluded to when we were talking about the supplemental draft. I was really interested to see where Sam Beal went. And the fact he went to the Giants, I actually really like that fit for him. I was really curious where he was going to go. This is a guy who I honestly don't understand how he didn't get drafted besides just getting a little nicked up his senior year. Coming over from Western Michigan, this guy had some special teams value, not as much because Darius Phillips kind of killed that role. Right. I mean, the guy was a monster return in the return game. So I really like Sam Beal. That's a guy who I'm definitely keeping an eye on. But again, I don't see him pushing into a starting role unless Eli Apple flips out again.
Eli Apple flipping out again. You want to talk about that? I know we went back and forth throughout the season.
I still like Eli Apple.
Yeah, he's a beast, man. But
it's that head game, you know.
You think you keep it under wraps?
I hope so. Like, I'm really hoping that this offseason he's started turning stuff around.
Give me a probability. 70%.
That he's going to start week 1?
No, that he's going to keep his stuff together.
Oh, he's going to keep his stuff together? Well, I'll go like 75.
Okay. I'm going to go with 65.
It depends.
He's a hothead.
If they're winning or losing, he's kind of honestly like Darius Randall, who used to be in Green Bay. Same type of player, same mental type of player.
So we got Landon Collins, surefire, number 1, number 2,
Easy.
safety.
Easy.
You're going to be picking him up. If you miss out on safeties, which there are a lot of good safeties, don't miss out on Landon Collins.
Yep, don't discount Landon Collins.
Another sneaky guy is Darian Thompson, a guy that I have on my roster that everybody else let go. I don't know why. He was injured last year, and he was just hanging out there. So I was like, oh, man, I got to get him.
I've revamped my safety. My safeties or else I'd have been in that category too. It was a good pickup.
You want to do the William Gay dance?
No. Man. I still like it when Little Wayne mentions him in his diss song when Green Bay and Steelers played each other. I'm just saying. I like it. All right, let's move over to the rotating spot, which is the linebackers.
Let me go ahead and take this one because I love all of these linebackers. So we have Olivier Vernon, who's kind of playing out of position. I think he's going to be playing in that 3-4 over, where he's going to be down over the tight end, playing the defensive end, which really sucks because he's going to be playing a defensive end role, but not getting credit for that defensive end designation. But we've also got Alec Ogletree, who's going to be the strong side inside linebacker. This should work perfectly for Alec Ogletree because you've got Olivier Vernon, who's going to be taking on that front wave, and it's going to allow Alec Ogletree to knife in there and go get those tackles. I know a lot of people are high on him. A lot of people are low on Alec Ogletree, but I have him as my number 1 linebacker. And the reason being is because the stat crew there in New York, his high tackle production in New York or in LA and St. Louis, and BJ Goodson cannot stay on the field. Behind Alec Ogletree, you got Ray Armstrong, who's not going to push him for snaps, and you got Mark Hertzleach, who is more of a journeyman / special teamer. I think the rest of his career, I don't think he's ever going to step up and start making strides. The guy that I am curious about is Lorenzo Carter. We've seen how explosive he can play in college, but in this 3-4 system, depending on if they play Olivier Vernon, which I expect them to do down, he's going to be in that weak side linebacker position. This is kind of that float weak side linebacker position we're going to talk about in the X's and O's podcast about 3-4 and 4-3 and where his role fits in with this defense. But I think him being unprotected on the backside is going to allow him to have a lot of tackles if Alec Ogletree and BJ Goodson aren't taking all of them.
And you got to look at the one thing is the injury history that we've had time and time again with the Giants linebacking core. I feel like we always go through 2 or 3 of them every year where we're just constantly rotating them in and out. BJ Goodson was the guy I talked about all offseason. Right. And he was a guy who I kind of interested other people in our league, and that he got drafted higher than I wanted. I should have kept my mouth shut. But he was a guy who I really liked coming out. And I thought just from watching, I watched a lot of training camp and mini battles, and I thought he looked good. And I was also one of the first ones to say that the Giants' offensive line looked like trash. So, I mean, I enjoyed doing that part of it. But, again, guy got injured. I don't know what it is. And, again, you have Alex Ogletree, who was previously injured before coming over. But, again, he's got a big chunk of money, so we'll see how that goes too. Lorenzo Carter, I'm glad you talked about him. I didn't necessarily – when I drafted him, I did not think he was necessarily going to be a starter right away. I literally drafted him thinking that was going to be a spot where there was probably going to be an injury to somebody, and he might get some playing time with that stat crew that just gives some points away. So I'm looking forward to seeing. Maybe I picked up something that's a little bit better because I was a guy who I attacked my need positions, and then I went for linebacker depth later on in the draft.
Right. I
just kind of went opposite because after the first 2 linebackers were taken, I was like, well, I'm good. I'll wait for 40, 50 picks till I take another one. And that was Buck, in case anyone hasn't read his Twitter or been on anything. Yes, he took Roquan Smith and then Tremaine Edmonds.
Oh, and before that, I took Saquon.
Yeah, he basically just gets new guys in our league and then trades them into first-round picks, and it just works out every time. I tried to trade, but he wanted half my team. Just wouldn't work. I just gave him crap about it. So we covered the Giants. We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, let's move on to Jerry World.
At Jerry World, you got Sean Lee totaling 101 total tackles. Anthony Hitchens, who's gone, with 84. Byron Jones with 82 as the safety, now moved to cornerback. Jalen Smith with 81. Jeff Heath with 71. Sneaky asset, Jeff Heath. I'm calling it, man. He's going to be a beast.
Is that just because he kicked an extra point?
No, dude.
Is that why he's a sneaky value?
Dude. He didn't play most of the first half of the season.
Oh, no. Yeah, he didn't at all. He's hurt.
DeMarcus Lawrence with 58. Anthony Brown with 56. Jordan Lewis with 54. Xavier Woods with 42. Orlando Scandrick, who is gone, with 38. Damon Wilson with 35. Kayvon Frazier with 33. I believe he's a starting safety.
No, not right now.
Oh, yeah, they moved.
He's right behind Xavier Woods right now.
Okay. I thought they moved him out to safety. You got Tyron Crawford with 27. Chidobe with 25. David Irving with 22. Malik Collins with 22. Where's your boy, Paul? I gotta get him in here.
Which one? You already mentioned him.
Did I?
Yeah. Uzier.
No, I don't see him. The dude on Madden. Go ahead and tell us.
The dude on Madden?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're talking about Tyrone Crawford. So it just came out, I think it was yesterday on Twitter, today on Twitter, one of the two. Crawford got the picture of his Madden character. And to put it nicely, it was a pretty heavy set middle. All right. So he did not look, and Tyrone Crawford, he's a pretty cut dude for a defensive end. He's in good shape. Well, he sent to Madden. He's like, whoa, I need you guys to fix that. And again, that right there, that picture we're showing on our live stream, that's originally what they had him at. Or that's the finished picture.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you got to find the before picture. There you go. That one. There's the before picture. So they have him with a nice little pudge gut. And so he went on there and said, I think that needs to be under review, Madden. He's like, I don't know which one of your staff writers decided to make me look like Humpty Dumpty. I thought that was hilarious. And then so they went back and changed it. And then he's like, Madden approved. He's like, I give that the thumbs up. He's like, you don't have to change my stats. Just change my figure, please. So that was the funny thing because we're all getting into Madden mode. Myself, Buck, Buddy Kenny, and a couple other guys, we play squads. So we're all talking about it and sharing videos and stuff already of some of the early gameplay. So that's kind of our little side enjoyment that we like to do. So we also like to see how they play on Madden compared to what we see in real life because we always think that's an interesting concept.
Right.
But that was just a funny Madden news that happened today, and I shared it with Buck, and we thought that was a pretty good laugh. All right, let's start with the linebackers this time. Let's start with the middle. We got strong side. You got Leighton Vander Esch, a.k.a. what I call him is Frankenstein. You have Justin March Lillard behind him. In the middle, you have Jalen Smith. Behind him, you have Trevon Johnson. And then on that weak side, you have Sean Lee. And then behind him, Damian Wilson. And then also another guy I want to mention off the top is Chris Covington. He's a guy who I really liked in our draft process. He was a 6th-round pick this last year. A guy who I could see because, again, it's kind of like a not really a Luke Kuechly thing. I'm trying to think of another linebacker who gets hurt quite often. But Sean Lee gets hurt quite often, and that's the scary part that I would love to be like Sean Lee's the best. And when he's in there, he's one of the best for sure.
Right.
But it's the injuries that scare us because I don't know if Vander Esch is going to be able to carry a load if Sean Lee's gone. We'll see. I know Buck's not as high on him. I know a lot of guys aren't just because of how he is compared to Sean Lee.
My thing about Leighton Vander Esch is I think he runs like a young fawn or a deer, you know. He's kind of got that awkward gait to him. It looks like he knows where he's wanting to go, but his body just can't get where he's going. I think it's because he's top heavy and he's tall.
He's tall. Yeah, he's a tall guy.
He's a little uncoordinated. We saw that in the bag drills whenever he was going through that in the combine.
Dipping the shoulder was a little bit difficult than some of these other guys.
Right, and we're both big guys. You know,
Yep.
Being athletic as a big guy is kind of difficult just because the brain, again, I talk about weird stuff, but the brain has more distance that it has to travel and send signals throughout your nervous system, you know.
Mhm.
That's why I hate seeing little guys because they're all jacked, you know. But, yeah, nothing against little guys, though. Just kind of jealous because y'all can get muscle way faster. Speaking of muscle really fast and coming back from injury, you got Jalen Smith. This guy, I have been wanting him to take the leap. But one thing that I've always known is at Notre Dame, he wasn't a high tackle guy. I think the highest he ever got was 80 total tackles.
Yep.
He's explosive. He's got good instincts, but he hasn't been able to jump over that curve and get into the elite tier yet.
What's funny is that's your guy, but your team is the one who messed up his whole career so far.
Yeah. Jalen Smith, though, I really want him over Sean Lee just because of Sean Lee's injury history. Jalen Smith's injury history, we haven't seen as much in the pros. Really, they've been trying to shelve him as much as possible to save him.
Yeah, they really have worked him in nicely. Like they've let him go in slow, and they're like, yeah, we know we're going to take some hits somewhere around the line on this, but they end up getting good defensive line play last year, and that kind of made up for it.
Right.
And so he was able to kind of sub in and play a little more. I just don't know if the middle linebacker, like just physically, I've never looked at Jalen Smith and said that's a middle linebacker. I've always thought that he'd play on an end somewhere, like on a linebacking
weak side.
Yeah, or a weak side guy. Just from body type. But again, guys changing in the NFL, they start getting trained in certain spots, and they have coaches that coach them up like that.
Right. So let's move into the defensive line. When we talked about the defensive line and how it's been the bane of their existence that they've struggled to get pressure from the defensive line. Another key spot was their cornerback play. They haven't had guys that could shut down the opposing wide receivers. That's kind of a nod to why they've got Byron Jones moving to cornerback instead of playing safety. He's got that elite speed and everything else where you get him out on the edge and he can cover these corners. But he can't tackle Tyreek Hill out in the open field. We saw that last season whenever they made the halftime touchdown. So you've got DeMarcus Lawrence, and behind him you've got Coney Ely. DeMarcus Lawrence is playing in a contract season. I don't like to go down narrative street too often, but I'm going to go down it with DeMarcus Lawrence just because of the way he played last season and being in a contract season again this year. I believe he's a free agent or franchise tag.
I believe so. Yep.
So expect him to play and to ball out. Expect him to be healthy, which has been his problem years past. You got Malik Collins, who's a stud defensive tackle. Him right next to DeMarcus Lawrence is only going to help both of them. David Irving, one of those defensive tackles that I picked up in a redraft league last season, and I started him the last 8 games of the season. He was highly productive for me, and I'll continue to plug and play him where I can get him. You got Tyrone Crawford. Behind him, you've got Taco Charlton. Behind Irving, you've got Jihad Ward coming from Oakland. I thought he played surprisingly well, but we really didn't get much of a chance to see him just because of the depth there in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really it. Randy Gregory just got reinstated. He's behind Marcus Lawrence. I could see him playing over Tyrone Crawford. Am I going to take a swing on him? Yes, but it's going to be towards the end of the draft, last 5 rounds or so, just because I expect people to forget about that. And also, KU grad, man, Dorrance Armstrong. We really liked his tape in the short amount of burst that he showed us.
Yeah, I just really wish he wouldn't have gone to Dallas. I mean, I think there's places he could have gone where he could be in the starting spot.
Right.
Honestly.
Do you think he's the long-term answer for DeMarcus Lawrence?
I don't know, man. I would hope so. But again, if Randy Gregory pans out and doesn't pull a Josh Gordon and get himself basically life suspended, then there's a possibility there. Honestly, I think Taco Charlton is a really good player, and I feel like whenever they have guys that they draft, I feel like they on the defensive line or even linebacker spot, it takes them more than 2 seasons to get fully into the rotation in Dallas. And I don't know if that's just a coaching scheme or what, but Randy Gregory, again, being suspended, they've always him. They keep throwing him in. So I would still say that Taco Charlton's going to have to try to take a step this year and see if he can get more playing time, kind of spell Tyrone Crawford and get in there a little more. But Dorrance Armstrong is a guy who I can honestly see moving over to linebacker as well.
Right.
If they needed the depth over there, I feel like he could go in and compete with Chris Covington. And I think he's a little bit better than Chris Covington, to be completely honest.
I'm not quite sold on that, but I do see what you're saying. I mean, we saw the way he played at KU. I would like to see him grow into that long dynasty aspect or asset for DeMarcus Lawrence because I expect them to cut ties. We've seen in years past, whenever somebody gets franchise tagged, very rarely do they end up getting signed.
Yeah.
Kind of worried about that with Khalil Mack and the Raiders. But Taco Charlton and Dorrance Armstrong, I think they've got at least another year before they become fantasy relevant.
Yeah, I think for Taco that's the same thing. But I mean, I look at it on paper and I feel like the Cowboys got decent depth at their defensive end spots right now.
Yep.
As it lays right now, without anyone getting suspended again or getting hurt. But I think that'll be interesting. I don't. We live in the area where it's either the Chiefs or the Cowboys, so usually I hear all about them, so I kind of keep up, even though I'm not trying to necessarily.
Right.
All right, so we got the backfield left. Is that correct? Or we already covered them. All right, so we got the backfield left. We got the left side cornerback. We got Byron Jones. Behind him is Duke Thomas. All right, and then you got at free safety, you have Jeff Heath and Jamil Showers. At strong safety, you have Xavier Woods, not the wrestler. This is the football player. Don't get confused. And then there's Kavion Frazier behind him. And then on the right side, you got Chidobe Awuzie, former draft pick from Colorado, guy who has sat on my practice squad, and I'm hopefully going to pull him up and actually have a decent cornerback. Behind him is Marquez White. And then in that nickelback role, you have Anthony Brown, and behind him, Jordan Lewis. Out of all these guys, again, I'm excited to see Awuzie finally step into that role. Orlando Scandrick's not taking snaps from people anymore. I think I saw a lot from him in Colorado. I thought he was a really good cornerback. I saw some things that I saw future value there wherever he went. And I'm hoping that this year is the year we're going to start seeing it pay off. We would like the Dallas seemed to get really good production out of 2nd-round picks. If you go through and look at their history and look how many 2nd-round picks they have that are in that starting role or backup role right now, it's pretty surprising how many they get good value out of. Jeff Heath, Buck is probably going to talk a little more in depth on him. But again, I think he's an excellent value to pick up. A lot of guys have forgotten about him. I'm sure you could trade and get him similarly cheap. So that's a guy who I would look at. Byron Jones, he's more of a low-end cornerback for me. He's not going to get you a ton of points. He's more of a one-on-one type of guy. But again, I would look at Awuzie as a guy who's probably going to get thrown at this year early. Especially with the teams they face, I think that he could be a fantasy value and possibly a dynasty moving forward.
Yeah, just looking at Jeff Heath's stats, first game that he played last season was against 49ers. He had 6 total tackles. He had over 5 tackles in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 games, it looks like, out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the numbers are there. That's 10 points in our league.
Then he had, 3 interceptions, I think, as well this year?
3 interceptions, yep, and no sacks.
He's the one who got the extra point, right?
Yep.
Or the field goal, extra point.
I think him moving free safety along with Xavier Woods is going to increase his value. This guy's going to go undrafted in a lot of leagues. I think you could pick him up in the last round in most of your IDP leagues and be pleasantly surprised by the safety. Whereas you're going to go after a Landon Collins in the top 10 rounds, or 15. I do like Byron Jones. I think he's going to get picked on a lot just because of Chidobe Awuzie on the other side. He's a shutdown guy. Jordan Lewis, who's better in coverage than in man-to-man, playing the nickelback. I don't really expect them to play him as much, especially with Anthony Brown starting over him. But I'm going to pick up Byron Jones where I can get him. Again, he's going to be in the last couple rounds. Just because so many people are soured on him. They haven't got the production they've been looking for. And the Cowboys really haven't got the production they're looking for. He can use that elite speed, and he can cover huge distances. He's kind of like, not necessarily just like, but he's sort of like Malik Hooker, where he can get in your face and he can get to where the ball is going. He's got that quick snap speed to change direction and get where he's going.
All right, and that pretty much wraps up the NFC East. Now we're going to head up to North. I think we're going to start in Chicago. Again, they were one of the teams that have started early in training camp, so we're already seeing some of their plays already. They were even talking about Tariq Cohen's touchdown dances. That's how the NFL Network works when they cover him for like the 5th time. But it was still funny to watch them try to imitate his touchdown celebrations he's planning on. So he's planning on a big year just in case those guys who do those redraft leagues and the offensive side, that's definitely a guy I'd be targeting if it was me.
Right.
But going in their defense, there's a lot of pieces here that are interesting. I feel like there's a lot of talking points, and that's crazy for me as a Packers fan to talk about how the Bears have a lot of possible guys that you're interested in.
Yeah.
So let's go into.
Go ahead.
Oh, why didn't you say that? I got you.
What's in the stream?